everyone. It's Ellen Besner here from the CJN's North Star podcast, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News and made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. And as always, this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Monday, October 27th, 2025. On today's episode, our show's producer, Andrea Varsany, has been out on assignment and she went behind the scenes to bring you this story about Ha'ikar. It's the name of a new regular monthly peer support meeting for 20 and 30-something Jews from the Toronto area where they're encouraged to come together and to process their feelings in the wake of October 7th and the spike of antisemitism they've been living through here in this country. The grassroots initiative was launched by founders Jacob Weiss and Jay Ginsherman. The duo have been friends since childhood, and they actually met growing up attending Temple Har Zion, a Reform synagogue in Thornhill where Weiss's father, Corey Weiss, is the rabbi. As Andrea discovered when she attended one of their meetings, they usually get about 10 people from all different political leanings. Here's her report.
I think the one thing I didn't notice is that my Judaism was not taken seriously as a real culture, as a real identity. Especially, I went to this all-girls liberal private school when I was in grade 10, and they wanted us to be very politically active, very politically motivated, very progressive school, which at first I'm like, great, that's where I am. I love this. But then I wanted to bring up anti-Semitism. I'm like, oh, I'm Jewish. I think it's important. We talk about this. And my school never really got back to me. I was very clear, like, I want to do a presentation, because every week you're allowed to do a presentation about everything from the whales to crop growing or like immigration. And they wouldn't allow me to speak about it at all. They were very clear, like, we don't really want to touch on that.
That's a clip of what it sounded like last month at the peer support group Ha'ikar, held in a hall at Temple Har Zion on Bayview Avenue in Thornhill. The name Ha'ikar means the most important thing and comes from the song Gesher Tsar Me'od, based on a famous Hasidic prayer about the world being a narrow bridge and the most important thing is not to be afraid.
And so we kind of thought at the time that was the perfect descriptor of what we were trying to do, because I think fear was really the defining emotion that we were seeing.
We also kind of thought like, oh, you should go to it. It's the most important thing. And we kind of needed a little bit of humor in that time to keep us going in such a dark, depressing time of February of 2024, when you were just seeing so many more protests, not knowing what's right. So I think we took a lot of inspiration in those words in that song, Gesher Tsar Me'od. And some kind of magic kind of happens when you have Ha'ikar, where no one's raising their voice in front of each other. People challenge each other respectfully. And I think that's the spirit of Black Gesher.
In February 2024, 4 months after October 7th, Jacob Weiss and Jay Ginsherman were still reeling from news of the attack and the explosion of opinions, protests, and anti-Semitism that followed.
I think I just felt really frustrated and lost, and I was looking for something I could do with those feelings other than just be angry all the time and just keep asking the same questions over and over again. And so I wondered, is there a way we can talk about this and talk more locally and less about the conflict? I think there was sort of this, tightrope of how do we mourn what happened on October 7th over the noise of people basically outwardly denying what happened or trying to justify it with the, military response on Gaza. And it felt like we and people in the community just didn't really have a place to mourn and didn't know what to say to each other. So it just felt right to give that a platform and give people a way to communicate these things that we weren't really able to talk about, sometimes even at home.
So I think two very different things. There are a lot of people going just really down one path, kind of seeing it almost like as a sports game. Like you would go through your Instagram statuses and you would see like which flag people were posting. Some Jews were wanting to say like, no, I'm a good Jew, I'm against what Israel's doing. And then some people were like, we need to win the war. And some even people saying we need to resettle Gaza, make it a parking lot. And we didn't really see a place for Jews who were not wanting to go to each extreme to really talk about how they're feeling.
So the childhood friends applied to host a monthly discussion group at the synagogue where they grew up together. The idea being to create what they call a brave space rather than the usual safe space. A place to express fears without judgment or raised voices, but where people can have different opinions and respectfully discuss the current climate from a personal perspective rather than arguing about solutions to a war that we don't actually have all the intel for.
So I've been to like these safe spaces before, and I find a lot of people there's a lot of silence because people are kind of afraid about, have I spoken too much? Am I going to say something wrong? And then I've heard the concept, I can't remember where exactly, but about this brave space where it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to have emotions and be human. And we handle that by having a discussion. So that's why we say, you can challenge people, but challenge respectfully. You can say what you want to say, but this isn't your soapbox. Like, this isn't, like, you can make your own YouTube channel or TikTok if you want to do that. You're not here to prove your own points and hear yourself talk. You're here to kind of add something to that space in between the tables. And I think that's where that kind of bravery comes from.
When I went to the September meetup, I walked into a large hall just next to the sanctuary at Temple Har Zion. The tables were set up in a chet shape, or a U shape for people unfamiliar with the Hebrew alphabet, with people sitting around the outside of them. There's also a table loaded with pizza, chips, fruit, and pop.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for coming. All right, so we're going to start by everybody's going to say their name, their pronoun, and on a scale of 1 to 10, how afraid you are right now in regards to anti-Semitism. You want to start?
Sure. So my name is Mike, he, him, and scale of 1 to, I assume 10 is the high.
And you're
10, you need to see if there are points. 0, you're not Jewish.
Probably 4.
I'm Melissa, she, her, and between a 4 and a 6, so I think it depends on what part of the city I am in.
I'm Jay, Ile, and I would say off my phone, a 4, on my phone is 6.
It's fair. That was very fair.
Danny, he, him, and I would say 7 or 8.
Okay, so Leia, she, her, I'd probably say a 6, 7. 6 or 7.
I know you're driving pizza. Do you own it?
Yeah, I'm Dali. Nice to meet you. I'm so curious, what are the numbers about that even get a little...
Oh, sorry. So we're saying on a scale of 1 to 10, how afraid are you of anti-Semitism?
10 being really afraid, 0 is being like, I have never heard of this concept.
9.
Oh,
9?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm from Italy, guys. It's part of there.
The Ha'ikar meetups have been successful, and they've been going on for close to 2 years now. The September meetup that I went to had 13 participants, including myself, Weiss and Ginsherman, and 2 volunteers. There were some familiar faces and some new ones, and as you heard, there was even someone there from Italy who had a very interesting perspective.
I'm Dali. Can you remind me of your name?
Leia.
Leah. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear you were on alert about being Jewish already before October 7. I'm actually surprised to hear it, because my experience has been that my friends here in Canada and North America in general have been starting to understand my experience of growing up in Europe only in post-October 7. So, yeah, but...
Did you have similar experiences? Like...
Yeah, I definitely felt a lot about anti-Semitism.
Like, you didn't, like, openly, you would say it.
So not interrupt each other.
I felt very safe as a Jew. And when I moved here, I felt a disconnect, actually, from the Jewish community, because there is a lot of privilege here. Maybe it's hard to be aware of it when you're born and raised in it. But then with October 7, there was a whole different type of awareness that started. And I actually felt way more understood and validated in my own experiences as a Jew.
At the meeting, people used their real names and voiced the kind of challenges which many young Jews like themselves have encountered and have become normalized.
I was hesitating to answer because I don't like the term paranoia in this context. So I find that paranoia is more about an detachment from reality. And I think in this case it's justified fears. So I do find myself, when I'm in public, have thoughts like, wow, if these people around me only knew that I'm Jewish, what would they do to me? Even yesterday, I was the orientation week on campus, and one of the booths was about stop the genocide, and they were so friendly with me, right? Because I'm from Italy, but I really did think if they only knew that actually I lived in Israel, and I speak Hebrew, and I have also an Israeli citizenship, and I'm Jewish.
I just want to say, she reminded me of something that just happened to me recently. We have a very close relative of a family member who is getting treatment for a medical condition. And we were at the hospital, and there's this really friendly janitor. And we talked a lot. I just got to know him a little bit. We talked about some things. He's from Syria. And we didn't talk about politics. We talked about different topics. And then I said, how's your family doing in Syria? He's like, well, they're not doing so well. They don't like, the new government is not good for his family. And I said, oh, that's so sad. Like I said, I pray for them. And I said, what is your view of it? And he says, well, he thinks Israel put this guy into power. And I'm like, Israel, the Jews. He's like, I've like befriended this guy. Now he's like, he doesn't know I'm Jewish. He doesn't know I'm It's the Jews. It's the Jews. They put in Al-Shara. His name was Al-Shara as the leader. Not knowing that I was Jewish or not, he probably assumed I wasn't. Maybe I was friendly. He didn't think I was a typical Jew in his mind. But he actually said something negative about Jews, and I'm like smiling there. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm praying for your family at Shul, and you're like cursing my people. So I just knocked off. I just say every time I see him, I'm like, hi, how are you? That's all. I don't talk much to him anymore.
Walking around Wonderland, the number of young kids I've seen wearing it looks like a soccer jersey, except it says Palestine with their flag all over, And just today I saw something like that with two young kids, one of them in a stroller and a keffiyeh draped over the back of the stroller. It's so there's a lot of symbols, and you're never quite sure what that person means by it or what they would care to do about it.
That's good, well said.
Thank you. Thank you, sure. One thing to add, how I feel kind of paranoid sometimes, because sometimes if I see someone on subway wearing keffiyeh, I don't know why they have it on. They may very well also agree that we need a ceasefire, which would also be a hostage deal. We probably might be on the same page, but I'm not going to talk to them because it's a subway. Why would you do that? If Richler was some kind of symbol or something to signify that I'm over this team sportification of people dying, and there really isn't a good symbol that just signifies not necessarily neutrality, but the third option.
How about a watermelon inside a hostage pin?
A watermelon hostage pin?
A watermelon inside something.
Yeah, I've seen that, but it still kind of feels
So you're in both sides.
People would be confused by that still. A single symbol that shows it as a whole, but that does not exist yet.
I wasn't there, but my friend was very happy I wasn't, because I probably would have gotten extremely mad. It was a softball barbecue. Alcohol was involved, and it was around the end of the night, and they were all just hanging out, and apparently one of the girls thought she was Italian and started trying to speak Italian to my friend. And she's like, oh, I'm not Italian, but I'm Jewish. And she kind of had her arm kind of friendly like this on her, and kind of moves her arms back and goes, are you pro or against genocide? Never mentioned Israel. Never mentioned anything. Just said, oh, no, I'm not Italian. I'm from Canada and I'm Jewish. I think the one thing about it, she thought it was a joke at first because they were drinking, but the seriousness on her face, she's like, look, I don't want to talk about this. We've been drinking. If you want to meet up for coffee and have a polite debate, I will be willing to do that with you. But it wasn't good enough for her. She followed her around the whole party, harassed her completely, and just said, are you pro or against genocide? She's like, I'm not answering that question. Of course I'm against genocide, but there's some things about this conflict that are a little bit more complicated in my position. I have two cousins who are 17 and 18 who've just been drafted, who are protesting in Tel Aviv every day against Netanyahu's government. They've now been drafted, and they're terrified because they don't know what to do. I can't completely condemn everything because I fear for them. I fear for my family who is being under attack. She's had to basically defend herself. You see, that just proves my point. You're pro-genocide. And here's the thing. No one came to her aid. No one came to defend her. Everyone allowed her to just be harassed and basically chased out of the home. And they're basically well, she was drunk, and we're sorry you feel that way. And so I was actually very happy with the league at one point, because when everything kind of started out, they had this whole post saying Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Arabs, Muslims are all welcomed. And they put Israelis. So I'm like, okay, this makes me feel good. There might be some assholes in this league, but I feel good that they mentioned Israelis. They were very clear. Israelis are welcome. Everyone's welcome. But now you're seeing a lot more kefiyas, a lot more watermelon. It's becoming a lot more hardcore. And I become a lot more paranoid. But I kind of reacted because the next week we had a game, and the girl who harassed her was now on our team, has now taken the spot for our team. And I've taken it upon myself to add as much Jewish shit anytime she's around, and she can't question it. I'll say, Mazel Tov, Matzinyan. Oh, I got Shabbos on Friday. Sorry, I can't.
Ever since October 7th, 2023, Muslim and Jewish communities in Canada have been torn apart.
I've known you for 20 years. You've been at my house for Shabbat supper, I don't know how many times. And for 1 second, you can't put down your friend and just hold my hand?
We're fed a constant stream of Jews and Muslims talking at each other, about each other, but rarely do we hear them talking to each other.
There was, why are you doing this? What's the benefit of doing this?
This podcast aims to do something different. I'm Avi Feingold, a rabbi and a writer with the Canadian Jewish News.
I'm Yafa Sakeja, a Canadian-Palestinian entrepreneur and volunteer with the Canadian Friends of Standing Together.
We're sitting down with Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians from coast to coast and across the political divide, having difficult conversations in good faith.
We are not the Israeli government. Palestinians are not Hamas.
This is the place where we're both supposed to end up, Israeli and Palestinian, Arab and Jewish.
Subscribe to In Good Faith, wherever you listen to podcasts.
The founders of Ha'ikar aren't trained therapists, although Jacob Weiss is currently in a social service work program, partially inspired by his work at Ha'ikar. Ginsherman is a graphic designer and has some experience as a facilitator.
You can kind of be a part of what I like to call the Jewish Renaissance that's been happening since October 7th, of people like me. I didn't really go to synagogue that often. Sometimes people have asked me, like, before October 7th, would you set up an event like this? I don't think I would have attended it.
As Jay said, we would never be doing, before October 7th. It became a huge part of our lives. I'm in a social service work program probably a lot because of doing this facilitation and listening to people and learning about people. I often have no idea what I'm talking about, but I know that, when I'm asking these questions and people are digging down deep and spilling their guts sometimes, there's something there. We have to keep doing it.
For me, one of my favorite things to see is like at the end of Ha'ikar, where the Jewish goodbyes last so long and people take home food, which is always good. But you just see that, like, wow, community is being built. Is this concept in a greater world called like mutual aid. And I'm like, yeah, let's just call it the Jewish community. So I think it's just so nice to not just be able to have created that, but also be like thankful that we're in this position.
The key to their success? Establishing ground rules early on to keep the conversation from going off the rails, which seems to work for the most part.
Yeah, so we don't really have a way to suss out who shows up. We kind of like it that way. We want everybody from every perspective to kind of be able to come to this event. This was also sort of at the beginning of our events. We did have ground rules, but there was a specific rule we came up with about geopolitics from one particular participant who, would go on tangents that really had nothing to do with the conversation, but was also just very antagonistic within the discussions and would interrupt people and then would get angry when people called this person out for, interrupting and saying, you're interrupting me. And luckily that's really been that's been sort of the outlier of negative participation. I mean, it taught us a lot about facilitation and our ground rules and how important they are. But for the most part, people are really respectful, and eventually I did have to kick that person out after about 3 sessions, but you know, I wanted the conversation to be good. I wanted people to be comfortable, and I couldn't let somebody jeopardize that. And for the most part, I would say 98% of the time, people are extremely respectful, and I hope they go home after a meeting feeling like they learned something new, or they at least felt good about sharing.
That was the only time we've ever really had an issue.
The meeting I went to was also very civil. People challenged each other, but for the most part, they were just there to express their personal experiences, possibly because there was a reporter in the room recording the conversation, although Weiss and Ginsherman assured me that it was a pretty typical discussion. Ha'ikar and all the snacks are free for participants. Everyone, including Weiss and Ginsherman, are volunteers. And although Temple Har Zion has been the unofficial incubator for this project, Ha'ikar discussion groups have also been held at the Danforth Jewish Circle, Holy Blossom, and the founders are also hoping to expand further.
We have a panel on the psychology of extremism in the works. We also might be collaborating with the JCC on doing like an art class where you kind of paint what you're feeling.
They've also had film screenings and special guest speakers. More recently, they've begun 2 more discussion groups, Ha'ikar Zahav for older generations and Ha'ikar Bayachad for all the generations to come together.
I will also say, when we did the Zahav one, we kind of thought, like people said, like, oh, older generations, when they were like kids, they weren't taught to talk about their feelings. Maybe, no, they wanted to talk about their feelings. They talked more than the younger age groups. And we also heard a lot of people saying, I don't think older people are thinking the way I do. And then the same thing. So that's why we decided to do Bayachad. And a lot of these issues, both types of generations or age groups, have the same worries and have the same fears.
How are the conversations different when there are multiple generations in the room?
I think there's just a lot of initial sort of uncertainty of what the other generation is going to say. And I think they find out a lot of the time that they have a lot of similarities and the same fears. And maybe they're absorbing information differently, but we're thinking the same things, even though we've experienced history in totally different ways. Yeah.
I think it's very uncommon to have spaces where people of different generations can really talk to each other as representatives of those age groups. Through that, you get a lot of surprises. You realize there's a lot more diversity in each group.
For the CJN's North Star podcast, I'm Andrea Varsany.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of North Star, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Gronowski-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Our show is produced by Andrea Varsany and Zachary Judah Kaufman. Michael Freeman is the executive producer, and our theme is by Brett Higgins. To learn more about Ha'ikar and where else it's taking place in Toronto, go to the links in our show notes. And thanks for listening.